If you think taking one girlfriend out is already exhausting, try drifting on the sea for 10 days with 2 women in pajamas. No bathing, no toilet, drinking urine to survive, and they even stole fresh water and drank until their stomachs cramped. I had to reach into their throats one by one to make them vomit. And behind me, sharks have been following us for 3 days. Rolling heat waves swept into the life raft, and the familiar sea breeze, tinged with unease, bored straight into my mind. I half closed my eyes and poked my head out of the canopy. The glint on the sea surface was so harsh I couldn't open my eyes. The reflected sunlight was even more vicious than direct rays, so I had to pull the canopy shut again and decided to log the voyage later. Inside the raft lay 2 women, one older and one younger, both in a deep sleep. Looking at them, the weight on my heart grew heavier. One more person meant 2 more shares of fresh water and food to give away. The older one was Susan, a Chinese American in her mid-20s, dignified and stunningly beautiful, the wife of my employer. Before the passenger ship sank, she was a woman of the upper social circles. The younger one was Ye Wenwen, a Malaysian Chinese, just turned 18. Her pretty face still carrying the innocence of a student. Both were wearing only a thin layer of pajamas. To reduce water loss, the clothes had been soaked in seawater, clinging tightly to their bodies, their outlines faintly visible. But I had no heart to look at that now. 7 years ago, during a special mission, a plane crashed in the middle of the Pacific. I clung to several sealed suitcases tied together, drifting alone at sea for 133 days. That endless loneliness, despair, and a body ravaged almost to collapse drove me to reach for death several times. And now, I had once again thrown myself into the devil's embrace, and with 2 women who knew nothing about survival at sea. Our passenger ship was sunk by a torpedo. In the middle of the Indian Ocean, far from any coast, such an attack meant near certain death. My employer's brain was pierced on the spot by debris. Susan had no time to dress properly, and ran out in panic to ask for my help. I flung her onto the sloping deck. There was no time for tenderness then. Relying on the instincts honed over those 133 days 7 years ago, I seized a life raft amid the immense crisis and carried her aboard. And Ye Wenwen climbed up by herself at that moment. She was lucky. The huge suction as the ship sank dragged everyone floating on the surface down to the seabed. Not a single one survived. That rainy night, the sea was as if dyed with ink, with cold corpses floating on it, mixed among the ship's debris. I had the terrified woman hold a flashlight so I could salvage supplies that surfaced. After a full 2 hours of salvaging, I managed to get 2 cases of canned food, 1 case of bottled water, plus a quilt and a few thick garments. I put the cans in the hemp rope net bag tied to the stern of the raft, to prevent damaged edges from puncturing the raft. After hauling up the bottled water, I tied them down with ropes. If they fell into the sea in rough weather, it would be impossible to retrieve them. At sea, fresh water is the most precious resource, bar none. In the vast ocean, food is plentiful, but fresh water is extremely hard to come by. 10 days have passed since the shipwreck. Under my strict control, 5 bottles of fresh water remain, each only 300 milliliters. Yet the human body needs at least 475 milliliters a day. In this critical period, to keep them from dying of dehydration, I keep them in a prolonged drowsy state, giving them only 55 to 225 milliliters of water a day, and severely restrict food intake, because digesting food consumes the body's internal water. At first, they resisted fiercely due to unbearable thirst and hunger, but eventually yielded to my force. And I took charge of the fresh water and food. Because of this, these 2 women have always harbored hostility toward me. I disdain to explain. As long as we survive, all misunderstandings and humiliations are trivial. On this life raft, excretion is also a hassle, especially for women. I absolutely forbid them to excrete directly into the sea. Excrement carries a strong, fishy smell. Many people know sharks come for blood, but they don't know sharks can also track through vomit, excrement, and even urine. So urine must be stored, and feces thrown together at the stern of the raft. I looked up at the wispy, mist-like cirrus clouds in the sky, and my heart sank. Such clouds mean the next few days are likely to be sunny. For fishermen, that's good news. But for us, it's the deadliest weather. If this little fresh water doesn't bring us rain, all that awaits us is drinking blood to quench thirst, then dying in drowsiness and hallucinations, becoming lost souls in the ocean. I glanced again at the water scoop tied to the raft. It was a simple still I made from the standard tools. On such a sunny day, barring accidents, it can collect at most half a liter of water a day. If we encounter storms, collection is basically impossible. We must limit internal water loss as much as possible to ensure optimal survival time. When not drinking, we suck on buttons to stimulate saliva. Another 2 hours passed in desolation, and the sunlight was no longer so intense. I opened the canopy zipper, sat at the edge of the raft with a sextant, and took repeated observations, roughly determining our current position around 22 degrees south latitude. Combined with a dual-time watch on my wrist, I calculated the longitude at approximately 75 degrees east. I concluded that we are 2,000 kilometers west of the Mascarene Islands, and about 2,500 kilometers north is the Chagos Archipelago. Relying on the south equatorial current, if there is no deviation, it would take at least 1 or 2 months to drift to the Mascarene Islands. However, the harsh and changeable weather at sea makes deviation from the intended course inevitable. As long as the raft is not damaged, I can still spend time repositioning and returning to the course. What I fear most is drifting into the Benguela current. Once in it, we would circle endlessly in the Indian Ocean. Without a power source, we rely on the currents. Entering the Benguela current would leave only a dead end. Although there are some islands between the Chagos Archipelago and us, those islands only appear on professional nautical charts, and the chance of actually hitting one is far too small, like a leaf in a great river that must land exactly on a tiny stone tip jutting out of the water, nearly zero. Susan woke up. Seeing me logging the voyage, her gaze had shifted from initial hostility to a certain survival dependency. She knew very well that only I could get her out of this vast sea. But she also feared me, feared that I would kill her and eat her along with the young girl beside her. She must have heard of cannibalism in such extreme conditions before. And I held the power, controlling the fresh water and food. At dusk, Susan took off her outer garment. The space inside the raft was too low to stand upright. She sat gracefully, leaning forward and arching back. This woman was born with the elegance and voluptuous beauty of high society. Her skin used to be snow white, but after 10 days adrift at sea, it had shed its milky whiteness and taken on a healthy bronze hue. "Mr. Pan, could you help wipe the salt crust off my body?" Her eyes, like autumn waters, looked at me wearily, and she turned around half shyly. During the day, we sleep, and our clothes are constantly dampened with seawater to reduce sweating. By evening, salt crust forms on the body and must be cleaned off, otherwise the sea salt will chafe the skin and cause infection. I walked over and helped wipe her with a cloth. She slowly bent down, rested her head on my thigh, and cried, "I won't give up on you. As long as I live, you will live." After saying that, I covered her clean body with the garment. This was an entrustment and a test, in this desperate situation, towards someone with survival ability. She was afraid I would abandon them. Hearing my words, Susan nodded awkwardly, a little ashamed. She raised her eyes to look at me, and in that instant, seemed to see something hard and sustaining on my face. She gazed at me and slowly spoke. "I might be pregnant." My heart lurched. Pregnancy in this environment is absolutely fatal. She stared at me worriedly, tears welling up again, not knowing whether she feared for her own life or worried about that tiny, unformed fate. "Conserve your strength, we will survive." I uttered these words numbly. Susan had no choice but to nod and lie on her side, her posture exceptionally alluring. The young girl beside her, Ye Wenwen, though lacking her charm and allure. But the flavor of youth and the childish look were like half-ripe fruit, both tart and sweet. I looked at the two women, then at the little fresh water we had left, and an immense pressure welled up in my heart. At that moment, I could only pray to heaven for a slim chance of survival, to come across an island, or a timely rain. By nightfall, the temperature on the sea plummeted. The two women got up, drank the rationed water I gave them, and without a word laid down beside me, gazing at the star-filled night sky. Two pairs of bright, beautiful eyes reflected the lonely starry sky. In that instant, it was so beautiful that one forgot we were in the middle of the ocean, isolated and helpless. I only glanced at them before continuing to observe the Southern Cross and other moving stars in the sky. This helped me clearly grasp the direction of our drift. After drifting at sea for a long time, you can't tell whether you're moving forward or backward. Just like standing too long in the middle of a rushing river, you get that same illusion. On the calm, desolate sea, apart from the starry sky, there is no reference point. You might even feel that you are not truly real, just a soul drifting under the night sky. Ye Wenwen told me that she had originally planned to travel to Mogadishu with her uncle, but he had already perished. She said she had read my reports about the miraculous Chinese man who drifted at sea for 133 days. She asked me if I would lead them to escape the sea this time. I couldn't answer that question myself, so I didn't respond. I just kept looking at the night sky, feeling the wind direction around us. "Uncle, who do you most want to see right now?" When she asked this, she sounded like a young girl asking her lover, her face full of anticipation. She probably thought I would ignore her as usual. She just couldn't help being curious, wanting to know if this deep, silent man also had someone he missed. This time, I slightly parted my cracked lips and uttered 2 words, "Seagulls." Seagulls. Both women looked at the lonely night sky at the same time. There was nothing but starlight. When we see seagulls, we can find an island. The longer this life raft drifts, the more likely it is to be cut open by fish. Even with plenty of fresh water and food, we won't survive. As I said this, they exchanged a glance and fell silent. In fact, the seagull I mentioned had another meaning, my wife. I called her Seagull because she was my reason for living, the lighthouse guiding me home from the sea. I had planned to quit after this mission and spend the rest of my life with her. I never imagined I would once again throw myself into the embrace of the sea. The sea surface temperature at night was extremely low, and I slept between the 2 women. Even though they hadn't bathed for 10 days, apart from the smell of seawater, they still had a faint natural scent. Gradually, I also sank into sleep. Early in the morning, I was suddenly awakened by a woman's scream. I sat up abruptly and saw the 2 women curled up in the raft, clutching their stomachs and groaning in pain. Looking around, the scattered fresh water bottles were all empty, and there were 2 empty, scraped-out cans. My mind buzzed. "You?" Seeing their faces pale from stomach cramps, I had anger but nowhere to vent it. That water could have lasted 3 or 4 more days, and now it was all gone. After prolonged fasting, suddenly overeating or drinking too much can cause stomach cramps. They simply didn't know. I flipped Ye Wenwen over, pried open her mouth, and stuck my finger in to make her vomit. With a retch, she threw up everything she had eaten. I used the same method to make Susan vomit as well. Only then did the 2 of them slump weakly, their eyes dull. I was furious, but anger was pointless now. As the chance of survival slipped away before my eyes, a familiar sense of despair crept back into my heart. "I'm sorry. We were just so hungry and thirsty. Felt like we were going to die." Susan came to her senses and said to me, crying. Ye Wenwen also looked pained and ashamed. "Uncle, what do we do now? There's no water left." I ignored them and looked up at the boundless sky. The cumulus clouds on the horizon were thicker than the previous 3 days, showing signs of a fiery sky. As the saying goes, red sky at morning, sailors take warning. Red sky at night, sailors delight. A red sky at morning often means rain is coming. If we're lucky, there might be a heavy rain tonight or tomorrow night. But now, there was no fresh water at all. If it didn't rain in the next 2 days, we would surely die. Even if it rained on the 3rd or 4th day, prolonged dehydration would cause irreversible organ damage. I had to prepare for the worst. The 2 women, knowing they had made a huge mistake, both lowered their heads, not daring to look at me. Seeing that the morning sun was about to rise, I immediately set up the water collector to gather distilled water, hoping to get half a liter to keep us alive that day. "You 2 sleep. Try not to move. I have 2 bottles of urine here. Whoever is thirsty can drink." As I said this, I opened 1 bottle myself. The pungent smell of urine was nauseating, but I sipped it slowly as if it were nothing. The 2 women watched and felt sick. As the sky gradually brightened, the horizon indeed turned fiery, and the clouds were thicker than usual. I was extremely excited inside, because this meant there was enough moisture in the air, a sign of rain. But the whole day was oppressively hot and stuffy. Fish surfaced to breathe, but not a drop of rain fell by afternoon. This stifling heat was more torturous than the blazing sun, and the body's water evaporated even faster. By evening, it still hadn't rained. Everyone was unbearably thirsty, and we hadn't collected much distilled water. Despair rose again. As the sun dipped to the horizon, the temperature was at its most comfortable, but unfortunately, this was no time to enjoy it. I divided the collected distilled water into 3 portions, only 100 milliliters each. Don't drink it all at once. Eat 2 bites of canned meat, then slowly drink the water. Eat and drink slowly, or else stomach cramps will be trouble again. This time, the 2 women were much more obedient. I also ate, first drinking urine, then scooping out some canned meat with my hand, and finally taking a small sip of fresh water. As the man, I had to eat more to conserve my strength, to deal with any unforeseen events that might arise. After eating, they lay down again. I went over and pinched the skin on their arms to observe how quickly it bounced back, monitoring their level of dehydration. The two women had gotten used to it and didn't react otherwise. I had been keeping an eye on everyone's dehydration status all along, doing my utmost to extend our chances of survival. But now the fresh water was gone, and we had to endure another 12 hours before we could get new distilled water. During this time, drinking urine was unavoidable. Around 2 in the morning, the sea wind suddenly changed. I jolted awake instantly, woke the two women, and told them to put on their life jackets and inflate them. Is it going to rain? Susan's voice carried excitement. Ye Wenwen also looked over expectantly. It's very likely to rain tonight. Even if not tonight, it will definitely rain in the morning. I stuck my head out to look at the night sky. Sure enough, the starry sky was no longer clear. Thick cumulus clouds obscured the starlight and moonlight. The pitch-black ocean was like an abyss where giant beasts lurked, and our orange life raft swayed in the sea wind. Like a withered leaf drifting on a great river, fragile and barely holding together. At 4 in the morning, the sea wind grew stronger, and icy raindrops pelted the raft and our faces. We were instantly jolted from our dreams. It's raining, the young girl cried out in surprise, her face full of joy. But looking at the shape of the clouds on the horizon, my heart sank. The top of the cumulonimbus clouds had a strange shape, like an anvil or cirrus clouds. Anyone who has lived by the coast knows that's a sign of a coming storm, very likely a thunderstorm. If this heavy rain lasted too long, we might not survive it. Amid the joy, my expression slowly turned grim. But in the pitch darkness, the two women, immersed in the joy of rain, couldn't notice at all. I checked the safety ropes on them again to make sure they wouldn't be separated by the sea during the storm. Everything happened as expected. In less than an hour, a fierce wind rose, and our life raft was tossed onto the crest of a wave and then thrown into the trough, repeatedly and unpredictably, threatening to capsize at any moment. Everyone jump into the sea and grab the safety handles. I shouted. The two women jumped into the sea in 2 directions, grabbing the handles and ropes on the edge of the raft, and I jumped in as well. Seawater and torrential rain lashed down on us. Thunder rolled in the sky, as if the gods were roaring, and we crouched beneath their divine power, enduring the harshest test of life and death. In the pitch-black storm, we couldn't open our eyes, no one could hear shouts, and we couldn't even see the people next to us. If any one of us was swept away by a wave and the safety rope broke, the sea would mercilessly swallow us whole, with absolutely no hope of survival. The icy water frantically stripped away our body heat, making us shiver uncontrollably. The waves and undercurrents tore at our bodies relentlessly, as if warning us, this is the abyss of demons, where no human is allowed to set foot. Rain and waves constantly lashed our faces, making it extremely difficult to breathe. We had to desperately open our mouths wide, like fledglings waiting for their mother to return, occasionally getting a mouthful of salty, bitter seawater that choked us half to death. The pulling force of the currents was like 2 invisible giants, yanking our bodies from side to side. The skin on our palms, tightly gripping the handles, was directly torn apart by the continuous immense force. The exposed flesh, soaked in the highly saline seawater, caused excruciating pain. I was strong and powerful, barely able to hold on, but the two women could not. The first to be swept away by the waves was Ye Wenwen. Her hands were simply too weak to fight against the violent storm. She lost her grip and was dragged into the sea by the undercurrent. The buoyancy of the life jacket was of little use against the undercurrents and huge waves. A single wave could drag a person down into the sea for over 10 minutes without resurfacing. She was tied with a safety rope, but if she didn't come up within a minute, I would have to cut the rope. Otherwise, her body, dragged by the current, would seriously threaten the balance and safety of the life raft. I struggled to free one hand and pulled hard along the safety rope tied to Ye Wenwen. Amid the raging storm, she was nearly unconscious, but I finally managed to pull her back from the jaws of the sea. She clung tightly to my arm with both hands, gasping desperately for air while choking on water. Normally, she would have thanked me, but at that moment she couldn't utter a single word, feeling so miserable she was about to die. I had no time to attend to her. If the life raft capsized, it would be impossible to right it in these conditions, and we wouldn't be able to collect any more rainwater. Moreover, the water that had been splashed into the raft by the waves was now mixed with rainwater and completely undrinkable. We had to bail out the accumulated water before the big waves subsided. Once the waves calmed down a bit, there would be another bout of rain, and only then could we collect drinkable rainwater. So, the top priority was to keep the life raft from capsizing. "Miss Sue, you must hold on," I shouted sternly. Susan was on the other side of the life raft. If she let go, with only one side bearing the load. The raft would capsize in less than 10 seconds under the big waves, and all hope of survival would be lost. Susan heard the shout and wrapped her frozen hands tightly around the hemp rope at the edge of the life raft, hooking it with the crook of her arm. By then, Ye Wenwen had finally caught her breath. I glanced at her. Get on the raft quickly and bail out the water. Once the waves calmed down, collect rainwater immediately. Ye Wenwen was the most petite of the three of us. The girl's body climbed onto the life raft along my arm. Her pants had long been swept away by the waves, and her pale legs and snow-white buttocks became a sight in the rainy night. But at that moment, no one cared about such things. She grabbed a tool and started bailing water out without stopping. Over 2 hours later, the waves finally began to subside. I told Ye Wenwen to lower the canopy of the life raft to collect rainwater, and everyone's mood gradually calmed along with the waves. At 7 in the morning, the sky slowly brightened. I climbed onto the life raft first, then pulled Susan up. Her pants were also nowhere to be found, her long legs pale and beautiful, but no one paid any attention. We grabbed bottles and quickly filled them with the collected rainwater. The two frozen women looked at the ample fresh water, and finally, happy smiles appeared on their pale faces. They wanted to cry but couldn't, their darkened lips trembling incessantly, their teeth chattering. None of us had a dry piece of clothing, so we could only wait for the rising sun to dry and warm us. I wasn't idle yet, and went to check the stern of the raft, then I froze. The waves had swept away all our canned food. Last night's storm seemed like a deal with God, trading our canned food for this fresh water. The urgency of survival gripped me again. I had to catch some fish quickly, but eating raw fish could easily lead to parasitic diseases, so if conditions allowed, we needed to make dried fish fillets. What worried me more was that we were far from land, with no seaweed to be found. Without long-term vitamin supplements, scurvy and electrolyte imbalances could strike at any time. All the canned food is gone. After warming up, Ye Wenwen rushed to the stern of the life raft, and seeing the empty net, her youthful face was filled with despair. Susan also hurried over, and after seeing the rations washed away by the heavy rain, her eyes were full of fear. "Mr. Pan, what do we do?" Susan asked. I was sorting out the fishing line. Upon hearing this, I moved my now moistened lips. Fishing is the only way. You too. Pull up the net. Don't let it rot in the water. At sea, any survival item can be useful and must never be discarded lightly. Can we use it to catch fish? Ye Wenwen asked naively. I carefully sorted the fishing line and replied, the mesh of this net is too big for small fish, but not big enough for large ones. When the sea is calm, maybe we can use it to catch fish weighing around 4 kilograms. But we must be very careful not to let them puncture the life raft or your hands. It's okay if our hands get pricked. We're not that delicate anymore, right? Ye Wenwen said. I glanced at her ignorant expression. Some marine fish carry Vibrio vulnificus. If you get pricked and don't have anti-venom, you'll die within 3 days. We have no medical care at sea, so don't get any small wounds. My words made the two ignorant women turn pale with fright. How could they have known that a small wound could cause such a disaster at sea? After sorting out the fish hooks, I tied the fishing line to the end of a paddle. All that was missing was bait. Because the heavy rain had cleared out all our food, leaving not even a scrap. I had to catch some small fish or other small creatures as bait. Otherwise, we would go hungry all day. With my current physical condition, I wasn't sure I could free dive. So I tried to avoid diving into the sea to catch fish. I jumped into the water, felt along the bottom of the life raft, and grabbed a handful of sea snails clinging to it. People who sail year-round regularly clean these sea snails off their boat bottoms, but at this moment, they provided me with bait. After I grabbed handfuls of sea snails, the two women on the raft were overjoyed. It was as if they had discovered treasure. Kneeling in the life raft, they carefully cleaned the sea snails, completely unaware that their movements caused their collars to droop, fully exposing themselves. Be careful not to get your hands pricked, and also, dry them before eating. Theoretically, parasites on sea snails cannot survive after the host dies and is exposed to intense sunlight. I reminded the two ravenous women. After preparing the bait, I stood up and observed the fish schools in the sea. The light was good, making it easy to see the swimming fish. I wasn't just casting my line wherever there were many fish. I was observing the behavior of the fish schools to judge if there were sharks nearby. If there were sharks, we couldn't fish. After observing for a while, I cast the hook and waited to see which unlucky fish would bite. I turned back to look at the two women. These two beautiful women were carefully using fish hooks to extract the snail meat and placing it on their spread-out clothing. Women are naturally meticulous creatures. I turned my head to look at the distant horizon, still unable to see any coastline. I was constantly observing the currents, wind direction, cloud formations, and any marine life that might appear in shallow waters, all of which could help me find an island or land. I was also calculating our latitude and longitude, wondering if we could drift into the Indian Ocean shipping lanes, so we might encounter oil tankers. But rather than hoping to meet a ship, it was better to hope for an island. Most of the shipping lanes in the Indian Ocean are used by oil tankers. There are few people on board, and because they spend long periods at sea, they keep their schedules fully occupied and have no interest in the endless ocean, never bothering to glance at the sea. So even if we encounter a ship, we may not be rescued. After all, we have no signal gun or sea dye, otherwise even the three of us shouting couldn't wake a deep-sea monster. But encountering a ship is still better than nothing. After a night of struggle, drowsiness washed over me. I lay down and fell asleep. I don't know how long later, I was awakened by Ye Wenwen's pleasant girlish voice. The fishing line moved. A fish is hooked. I quickly got up, but Ye Wenwen was already pulling the line, and it was too late to stop her. Ah! With a scream, Ye Wenwen let go of the line. Susan also hurriedly leaned over. What's wrong? I cut my hand. I found medical tape in the first aid kit, cut a small piece, walked over, and took her small hand. I looked at the injured inner joint of her finger, where the fishing line had cut a wound neither deep nor shallow, still oozing blood. I cleaned it with fresh water and then bandaged it. When fishing line has been in the sea for a long time, the part floating on top gets coated with a layer of salt frost, which is as sharp as a blade. Be careful from now on. Oh, Ye Wenwen pursed her lips. She felt my concern, and her eyes shimmered with emotion. I guess she might be seeing me as her father or an elder. Susan pulled Ye Wenwen back inside to sit down. I took out a pair of gloves from the tied-up toolbox, and only then did I reel in the line. The catch was a tuna, about 6 kilograms. It was very strong. Ye Wenwen was lucky not to have lost half a finger earlier. I didn't dare pull it straight up, afraid it might poke a big hole in the life raft. After pulling it close, I tied the line to the rope on the side of the raft, then jumped into the sea with the standard knife from the toolbox and directly slaughtered the tuna. Although this might attract sharks, there was no other choice. Bringing a 6-kilogram big fish into the tiny life raft would be an irreparable disaster for us. It took quite a while to kill the tuna. Then I wrapped it in clothes and carried it onto the life raft. Inside, the two women had already laid out a thick piece of clothing. I put the fish down and began to dissect and cut it up. Tuna meat is tender, delicious, and very high in protein. It is rich in bioactive polyunsaturated fatty acids such as docosahexaenoic acid and eicosapentaenoic acid. At the same time, it contains abundant methionine, taurine, minerals, and vitamins. Moreover, its liver provides some of the iron, vitamin A, and other trace elements the human body needs. You don't need to eat much. One meal can last you a month. I was very satisfied with this catch. Sliced and dried, this fish can feed us for quite a few days. Besides, we can catch more fish every day. Small ones can be eaten directly. Catching 1 or 2 more big ones as reserves will be enough. Judging by the weather, it won't rain for the next few days, so drying fish is feasible. The two women were very happy to see today's bountiful harvest. From their expressions, it was as if they hadn't eaten meat for a long time, and Dad suddenly brought home a fish they had never tasted before. Their expectant eyes sparkled. Here, everyone's happiness is simple, because it is hard-won. Soon, under my skilled hands, the fish was cut into fillets, which the two women carefully strung with fishing line and hung outside to dry. I threw the fish guts behind the life raft, and they drifted away with the current. Under the scorching sun, we drifted aimlessly, like 3 ants clinging to a fallen leaf, floating toward the endless distance on the ocean current. While I was fishing, I saw in the distant sky a huge, mushroom-shaped cumulus cloud, which was stationary. A surge of joy rose in my heart. I quickly put down my work and gazed into the distance below the cloud, which appeared light green. Soon, I saw many seagulls flying from the direction of the cloud. An island. There is an island within about 10 kilometers ahead. I shouted excitedly. The two women immediately looked into the distance. But where could they see any island? There was only thick sea fog. I was in a good mood at that moment, so I smiled at them. Seeing my confidence, Susan leaned over and asked, "Mr. Pan, how can you be sure there is an island over there?" I explained, "Look at that cloud. It has been stationary for a long time. After last night's wind and rain, the daytime temperature is high. Land areas are warmer, and surrounded by the sea, it creates a sea breeze blowing toward the island center. When the sea breeze meets the land, it rises, causing the cloud to remain stationary. Just based on that cloud, you're sure there's an island? Susan was skeptical. Not only that, there is a light green color below the cloud, which is caused by light reflecting off the island. Most importantly, look, seagulls have appeared in the sky, and they are flying toward us, which further proves there is an island over there. I said, isn't the island in the direction the birds are flying from? Susan asked, furrowing her willow leaf brows. Seagulls fly out from land in the morning and fly back toward land in the afternoon and evening. It's morning now, I explained. At this moment, Ye Wenwen was very excited, probably remembering what I had said. Where there are seagulls, there is an island. Uncle, so we really have encountered an island. Ye Wenwen looked excitedly at Li Hai, her sparkling eyes gazing at the seagulls flying overhead. I didn't speak at that moment, but crouched down and scooped up a handful of floating debris from the sea. This is floating vegetation. If we only had the previous evidence, it wouldn't be enough to confirm an island ahead. It could also be because our physical condition had deteriorated, causing hallucinations, or we might have seen a mirage. But this floating vegetation allows me to be 100% sure. There is definitely an island ahead, I said with great certainty. At this point, everyone became excited. We took turns rowing. Rowing over 10 kilometers is no easy task, and our physical strength was failing. We were also very hungry. But thinking of the island ahead, each of us mustered our last strength. After rowing 6 kilometers, everyone's hands had blisters from the oars. The sea fog dispersed, and an undulating black line appeared ahead. That's a mountain ridge. The ridge of an island. 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 There really is an island. Ye Wenwen excitedly stood up and shouted. As she straightened up, her white shirt was pushed out, her curves extremely alluring. You have to know, both women were in a state of going commando. Of course, I didn't look at her, but squinted to observe the island. The island was not small, about 3 square kilometers, with a main island and a secondary island. Such a small island on the high seas definitely wouldn't appear on ordinary maps. It might only show up on professional nautical charts, and it's impossible to name. At this moment, everyone was very excited. Even Susan, who rarely smiled, now showed a happy smile, and that smile was truly beautiful. Seeing the island, they, who had been exhausted, once again exerted themselves, eager to throw themselves into the embrace of that beautiful island. Pausing and resting, it took over 2 hours. Finally, just as our strength was completely spent, we successfully approached the island. There were many coral reefs near the island, colorful under the sunlight, simply beautiful like heaven on earth. It's truly so beautiful. I love you to death, Uncle. Ye Wenwen was so excited that she hugged me and gave me a kiss, only realizing it was inappropriate afterward, her pretty face blushing. Amid everyone's cheers, we finally successfully landed on the island. The 2 women stepped barefoot onto the sand, so comfortable that they simply lay down, enjoying the happiness of this narrow escape from death. They basked in the sunshine, the beach, and the hope of life. I dragged the life raft onto the beach, then lay down, closed my eyes, and rested. I felt that the air on the island was free and full of vitality. I grabbed a handful of sand, rubbed it hard, feeling the long-missed texture of land. After drifting at sea for so long, my whole head felt dizzy and swaying, as if heaven and earth were spinning. I lay on the ground, eyes closed, my eyelids reddened by the sunlight. With one hand clutching sand and the other covering my chest, I felt the solidity the earth gave me. At that moment, I felt my soul finally return to the earth. After a short rest, the 2 women went back to the life raft, eating fish fillets and drinking rainwater. Replenish protein and physical strength. I told them to drink the rainwater slowly, otherwise they would vomit. The 2 women were extremely hungry, but with their previous experience, they absolutely dared not wolf down the food. I also sat among them and filled my stomach, because there was still a lot to do in the afternoon, and I had to replenish my energy, since we knew nothing about this island. Not knowing if there were wild beasts on the island, or if wolves, venomous snakes, or the like would appear at night. So before dark, it would be best for us to first find a place to take shelter. Natural dwellings like caves are basically a matter of luck, so I still planned to first find a stream on the island, and build a shelter next to the stream. That way we wouldn't have to worry about a freshwater source, and with water, many survival plans could be carried out. After Susan and Ye Wenwen had eaten their fill, they picked up some football-sized rocks and arranged them on the beach to form a large SOS. If a helicopter passed overhead or a ship passed in the distance and saw this distress signal, we would very likely be rescued. I rummaged through the toolbox and found a hemp rope only as long as an arm, and tied it into a knot. Uncle, what are you doing? Ye Wenwen asked curiously. I pointed to the highest point of the island. I'm going to climb the tallest tree there and overlook the entire island, which will help us find a water source. This was a tropical rainforest with strange trees growing everywhere, and the entire island was covered in primeval forest. Finding a stream in such dense forest was very difficult because streams are hidden beneath various shrubs, but wherever there is a stream, there is sure to be a valley, and valleys can be seen from a high vantage point. Besides this method, there was another way, walking along the edge of the island. But this island was a rocky island, with many reefs and rocks around it, and walking around the island would take more than a day. Moreover, I had another plan, which was to see just how big the entire island was. After all, you can't see its size unless you're at the highest point. Getting a rough idea of the island's terrain would be very helpful for future survival. Mr. Pan, that's too risky. What if you get bitten by a venomous snake in there? Susan disagreed. Actually, her disagreement was understandable, since I was the only man on this island. In other words, the only labor force. The two women could survive on this deserted island for 10 days to half a month without a problem. But if they had to survive for a year or more, that would be a big problem. Because over a long period, although their survival skills would improve, the chances of survival would become smaller and smaller due to malnutrition, illness, injury, infection, and so on. Moreover, Susan suspected she was pregnant, which made the need for a man's care even more indispensable. I hesitated for a moment, my gaze lowered. The two women were still wearing thin clothes, their figures faintly visible. Susan's concern was not without reason, because snakes come out in the afternoon and at night. If I couldn't make it back before sunset, I would very likely be bitten to death by a venomous snake. I nodded and abandoned the plan, deciding to set out the next morning instead. Then I'll go pick some coconuts. Also, you two go gather some dry firewood. Don't go too far, and don't get too close to the forest. It gets very cold at night. We must start a fire, and then we can even eat some cooked food. When I said this, both women swallowed their saliva, looking greedy. We indeed hadn't eaten cooked food for a long time. The thought of sizzling, oily roasted meat naturally made one's mouth water. The two women very actively went to look for dry firewood, while I found a coconut tree with many coconuts. Climbing a smooth coconut tree with bare hands is very difficult and also dangerous. A man with full physical strength, if he had no auxiliary tools, would be exhausted just climbing up and down. Moreover, as shipwreck survivors who had been on a restricted diet for so long, our physical strength was greatly reduced. Climbing such a coconut tree without some skill or experience was practically impossible. One could fall at any moment and break a leg, or have the sole of the foot or leg pierced by branches below. On this deserted island, getting injured was absolutely not allowed. Injury meant a risk of infection, and if the wound affected an artery or bone, it would definitely be fatal. I was a mercenary and had participated in the Iraq War for money. Back then, the pay was daily, and we mercenaries sold our lives. So the money was carried on us in bundles. I remember once I survived by hiding in a tree, camouflaged for a whole day and night. That tree was tall and smooth, and no one ever thought there could be someone up there, because people couldn't climb it. But I could. I put both feet into the loop of hemp rope, spread my feet apart wider than shoulder width, and the rope loop tightened just right, like a rubber band pulled taut by two fingers. Then I jumped hard and grabbed the coconut tree. I was now like a big frog clinging to the coconut tree. I stepped on the coconut tree bark with both feet, and the hemp rope was tightened by my feet, so it could hug the trunk tightly. Using this method, as long as the tree surface wasn't oiled, one could climb up. At the very top, one could even stand on it, just by using one hand to maintain balance, freeing up the other hand to pick coconuts. Most old fishermen living by the sea know this technique. I climbed up, picked 5 or 6 coconuts, and threw them down. I thought how happy the two women would be when they came back and could drink the delicious coconut juice. We hadn't eaten anything with a different flavor for a long time, and our mouths were already bland and sticky, as if holding a mouthful of thick paste. I jumped down from the tree, took out a utility knife, and peeled 3 coconuts. The shell of a fresh coconut is not that hard, and I easily poked 2 holes with the knife, solving the air pressure problem when drinking. Then I put my mouth directly to one of the holes, tilted my head back, and drank. The delicious, sweet coconut juice instantly revived my whole being. I had never felt so happy. After drinking the coconut juice, I carefully cut out the flesh inside. I was waiting for the two women to return, so they could drink fresh coconut juice and eat delicious coconut meat. Just then, a scream came from the forest. The voice was Ye Wenwen's. I sensed something was wrong and immediately ran toward where the sound came from. Soon I saw Ye Wenwen sitting on the sandy grass, with a few pieces of firewood piled beside her. The base of her thumb on one hand was bleeding, and she was gripping the upper part of the wound with her other hand. What happened? I hurried over and asked. Ye Wenwen started crying when she saw me, her beautiful eyes brimming with tears, which made me very anxious. I was bitten by a snake. Did you see clearly what the snake looked like? I looked at her wound, but because it was a bloody mess, I couldn't tell for the moment what kind of snake had bitten her, so I asked urgently. If it was a venomous snake, she was doomed. I didn't see clearly. It hurts a lot. Am I going to die? Uncle, I don't want to die. Please save me. Don't worry. The number of venomous snakes is still very small. Look, this island isn't very big. If there were too many venomous snakes, it would affect the island's ecosystem. I comforted her and helped her up. She was so frightened that her legs were weak and she couldn't walk at all, so I had to pick her up and carry her out. If bitten by a venomous snake in the jungle, you must quickly leave the place where you were bitten. In the law of the jungle, other animals can generally sense what creatures are hunting nearby. If you don't leave the spot quickly, other aggressive creatures will soon come to snatch the prey. So if you don't leave quickly, more venomous snakes will come. I carried her to the beach and sat her on the ground. She was only wearing a small pair of shorts. Sitting in front of me, her girlish legs looked exceptionally beautiful. I told her not to move, and I ran to the lifeboat to get a bottle of water. I cleaned her wound with the water and saw 2 neat rows of teeth marks, which made me breathe a sigh of relief. Uncle, am I going to die? I'm really scared. I haven't even had a boyfriend yet. Ye Wenwen cried. I smiled. You won't die? I told her that if the snake was venomous, the wound would usually look like a zombie bite, with 2 fong holes or A//shaped bite mark. But the bite marks on her hand were in a neat row. This kind of wound is usually from a non-venomous snake, which might be larger in size, and looks a bit scary, but it's not venomous. But it hurts a lot, and it's all swollen and bruised. Ye Wenwen was still not entirely reassured. Her hand tightly clamped around her wrist, afraid to let go. But that's understandable. She knew nothing about snakes. Anyone bitten by a snake would be this nervous. Once bitten by a snake, you'll fear a rope for 10 years. This saying shows just how afraid humans are of snakes. The fangs and venom glands of venomous snakes can secrete various types of venom with different toxic properties, causing a series of poisoning symptoms. These symptoms are easy to spot. One type is neurotoxic venom, and another is hemorrhagic venom. With the former, after being bitten, the wound is neither painful nor swollen, but you may feel tired, your body temperature rises, and breathing becomes rapid. With the latter, after being bitten, platelets are destroyed, so the blood at the wound can't clot. The area swells, hurts, and bleeds, then breathing becomes difficult. Usually, you'll die within 4 hours, and the rescue window is only 2 hours. Your wound shows none of the signs of a venomous snake bite. You can't die even if you wanted to. I explained this to her, since Ye Wenwen is an international student, and if I didn't explain it professionally, she wouldn't be reassured. Hearing this, she finally relaxed. Her eyes were full of gratitude. Thank you, uncle. Just now I thought I was going to die. I was so scared I'd never see my parents again. As she spoke, Ye Wenwen started crying again. I bandaged her wound. At that moment, Susan also came back with an armful of dry firewood. Seeing Ye Wenwen injured, she came over and asked with concern. Luckily, it was a false alarm, or else there'd be one less person on the island. You two have some coconut water and some coconut meat. I went over, grabbed 2 coconuts, poked a few holes in them with a small knife, and handed them to the 2 women. It's so delicious. I never imagined coconut water could be this good, and the coconut meat is also incredibly tasty. I can't believe it. Ye Wenwen said excitedly. Susan also looked blissful. When she smiled, she was as beautiful as a female star in a toothpaste commercial. I have to say, this woman is truly good-looking. Especially when she's content and smiling happily. She looks absolutely stunning. I recalled something the employer said. No matter what happens, you must protect this woman for me. If something happens to me, you must get her to the destination. The people there will give you a reward of 10 million. I always felt this woman was no ordinary person, not just that man's mistress. And it also made me suspicious about the attack on the ship. She might be a key clue, but if I asked her now, she definitely wouldn't tell. After all, this involves the lives of everyone on the ship, and even the military. Can it be simple? Are we still sleeping in the lifeboat tonight? After feeling satisfied, Susan thought about the sleeping arrangements. After all, it's not safe for 3 people to sleep together. Men and women shouldn't be too close. Before, we had no choice, but now the situation is different. I looked at the sun to confirm there was still time to build a shelter, then glanced at the small grove of trees. I found a spot that wouldn't get wet when the tide came in. I pointed to a place under the coconut trees and said that spot was flat and dry, and there was a large rock facing the sea. Behind the big rock, we could block the sea wind. We could also use that rock as a wall, saving us from cutting too much wood for walls and conserving energy. We'll build a shelter there. The two women happily agreed. But now I was a bit troubled. You see, I only had a small knife, even smaller than a dagger. Cutting down a small tree isn't too hard, but cutting more trees might damage this little knife, and my hands couldn't take that kind of abuse either. This small knife is very useful to us, so we must use it carefully. If primitive people had a small knife, human history would have advanced tens of thousands of years faster. This shows how important a small knife is on a primitive island. Besides, this shelter would only be used for 5 or 6 days at most. After that, we definitely need to find a new shelter. Because there's no fresh water source here, and such a shelter isn't sturdy enough. If wild animals show up, the three of us would surely be eaten. So there's no need to waste too much time and energy here. As long as we can sleep, that's enough. I told the two women to gather as much firewood as possible, because the fire needed to burn all night. Then I went into the forest. I hoped to find bamboo, which mostly grows in valleys and along streams. Finding bamboo also greatly increases the chance of finding a stream. But that doesn't mean bamboo always means a stream. I was looking for bamboo to build the shelter, which would be more time and labor-saving than using wood. Bamboo is also easier to cut. It can also be used to make many tools, like fishing spears, fish traps, bamboo ropes, bamboo grills, bamboo spears, and so on. These are things that can greatly improve our chances of survival. And with only a small knife, these are the most advantageous tools I can make. If I had a machete, I wouldn't mind cutting dozens of wrist-thick trees to build a shelter. Before entering the jungle, I cut a 2-meter-long branch and held it in my hand. As I walked forward, I vigorously whipped the overgrown path ahead to drive away any venomous snakes hiding in the tall grass. I was wearing a camouflage suit, which effectively protected me from many natural sickle-like serrated plants, as well as wild mosquitoes and venomous bees. Most fortunately, I was still wearing my combat boots. But when the two women escaped, they were only wearing slippers, which they then lost in the sea. Now they could only go barefoot on the beach. Otherwise, I would have assigned them more important tasks. After more than 2 hours, I finally found a small bamboo grove. Each of these wild bamboo stalks was as thick as my arm. At most, I could only drag or carry 5 or 6 at a time. It was already past 1 in the afternoon. Going back, I wouldn't have to take the winding route I took coming here, since I was searching for bamboo then. Going back in a straight line would take about 40 minutes. I could make at most 2 trips, but cutting bamboo is very time-consuming. So all in all, I could only make 1 trip. The remaining time had to be used to build the shelter and start a fire. So I had to carry back 7 or 8 long bamboo stalks to meet basic needs. As for making other things with bamboo, there definitely wouldn't be time. That would have to wait until tomorrow. I looked around the bamboo grove, but didn't see any stream, which disappointed me a bit. After rushing for so long, I was parched. I drank 2 sips of coconut water from a bottle to moisten my throat, then began selecting bamboo. In this primitive tropical rainforest, bamboo often hides many green pit vipers. In a clump of bamboo, there could be 4 or 5 of them. If I cut bamboo from below, a green pit viper from above could fall and bite my neck or arm. A bite to the neck is basically hopeless, since there's an artery and a vein there that quickly return blood to the heart. Even if not on a deserted island, but in an ordinary forest, if bitten near the neck and you can't get medical attention within 2 hours, even if you survive, you'll be left disabled. I carefully used a branch to drive away those hair-raising green pit vipers. Several green pit vipers fell and quickly slithered toward my feet, as fast as lightning. Fortunately, I was prepared. With the short branch in my right hand, I fiercely struck the ground. The spot where I stood was solid ground, not bushes. If it were bushes, the branch in my hand wouldn't have been able to hit them. Only the bushes, and then I'd be as good as dead. This was a spot I had deliberately chosen. Without this awareness, I would have been bitten already. That ill-tempered bamboo pit viper tried to get back at me for disturbing its afternoon nap, but I broke its spine. Though venomous and dangerous, how could it ever outmatch human intelligence? The ground it crawled onto was exactly the grave I had prepared for it. After killing the viper, I used a branch to push it aside. Then I continued clearing the bamboo pit vipers in this area. I knew some of them were very patient and wouldn't be shaken down easily. But I also wouldn't be ambushed so easily. After beating the area with a branch for a good while and making sure there were no more vipers, I went over to cut bamboo with my small knife. The surface of the bamboo was extremely hard. I used the knife to cut a groove around the bamboo, but the cut wasn't deep enough to snap it off directly. And if I forced it, the bamboo would split. That would have wasted my time for nothing. So after cutting a circle with the small knife, I made diagonal cuts above and below the circle, angling inward. The resulting cut looked like a V lying on its right side. After cutting all around, I stood up, grabbed the upper end of the bamboo, and gave it a strong twist. The arm-thick bamboo snapped right off. Repeating this process, I cut down 8 bamboo stalks, each about 9 meters long. Then I divided them into 3 sections and used one stalk to whittle bamboo strips. These bamboo strips could serve as rope. I tied the 2 large piles of bamboo together and was utterly exhausted. My right hand was covered in blood blisters from using the small knife to cut bamboo. The muscles in my hand ached terribly, but I didn't have much time. It was already 4 in the afternoon. I couldn't stop for a moment. If I didn't get back before dusk fell, I would very likely be bitten to death by venomous snakes in the forest. Even if I didn't encounter a venomous snake, I might run into a predator out hunting. I took a long bamboo pole sharpened at both ends and threaded it through the middle of the 2 bundles, making a carrying pole. This way, I could carry the bamboo back like a farmer. The bamboo was full of moisture and extremely heavy. My shoulders strained under the weight, hurting terribly, but thinking about getting back before dark, I didn't dare stop for a single step, trudging painfully along this wild path. A walk that normally took 10 minutes took half an hour here. After walking for over an hour, I was drenched in sweat and had already drunk all the coconut water I'd brought. My physical condition was still too poor. By the end of this stretch, I felt on the verge of collapse, relying solely on willpower to make it back to the shore. When I returned, the sun had already dropped to the horizon. The beautiful fiery clouds over the sea were simply too gorgeous. I lay on the beach, gasping for air, and my body slowly recovered. The 2 women came over and tried to help me carry the bamboo back, but they couldn't budge it at all. They probably hadn't done any farm work since birth. So how could they know how heavy a man's load could be? Let me do it. After resting a moment, I hoisted the pole back onto my shoulders and moved step by step to the big rock. The 2 women hadn't been idle while I was away. They had actually found a large, flat stone. This stone could be placed over the stone fire pit to grill meat. They had even piled stones into a semicircular stove pit, though there was no charcoal fire in the middle. Nearby were some twigs and fluffy, dry plant material. Clearly, while I was gone, they had tried using these tinder materials to start a fire by friction, but without success. I reached out and took Susan's hand to look. Both hands were covered in blood blisters. Obviously, these were blisters from rubbing a wooden stick with her hands. Those delicate hands couldn't possibly withstand such friction. Susan lowered her head in shame because she hadn't been able to help me. Fire by friction isn't done that way. Don't force yourself in the future. It would be trouble if you hurt your hands, I said. Susan murmured in acknowledgement. Hearing my concern, she seemed a bit moved. I knew they both wanted to help, but wilderness survival isn't as simple as they imagined. Survival skills aren't just about knowing the principles. You need plenty of experience. Help me find a hemp rope and a green branch, I instructed, giving them a chance to be of some help. The hemp rope was easy to find, as there was plenty on the lifeboat. A green branch wasn't hard to find either. Just break one off from the small woods nearby. While Susan went to get the rope and branch, I picked up my small knife and took apart the bamboo. To maximize the bamboo's usefulness, I split 10 stalks in half. Splitting bamboo was easy. Just make a cut at one end and then snap it with force. In a short while, I had split 3 or 4 stalks and laid them flat on the ground. By the time Susan returned, I had already split 7, laid out flat to form a raft-like shape. Mr. Pan, will a branch like this do? Susan handed me the branch and asked. I glanced at it. It was about an arm's length, moderately thin. Very good, I responded, taking it and using the small knife to trim the branch, then carved a groove at each end. I tied the finger-thick hemp rope to both ends, making a bow. Of course, such a small bow wasn't for hunting. It was for fire by friction. I picked up the fire drill stick Susan had used earlier and looped the bowstring around it. This way, I only needed to lightly hold the top of the drill stick with my hand or something else, then pull the bow back and forth sideways, and the drill stick would spin rapidly without stopping. Seeing this, Susan and Ye Wenwen suddenly understood. Uncle, you're really amazing. Why didn't I think of that? Susan breathed a sigh of relief at that moment. She had been worried there would be no fire tonight. She still wanted to eat some grilled meat slices. Just use your brain when facing problems. Bring that dry wood over, and those fine, fluffy dry weeds, I called out, and Susan and Ye Wenwen sprang into action. Watching the silhouettes of the 2 shapely women against the dusk, I actually felt a bit of contentment. Susan brought over a leg-thick piece of dry wood. I used the small knife to poke a finger-sized fire pit in it. Since the wood was round, it would roll to the sides during fire drilling, easily causing mistakes. So I dug a pit in the ground with my bare hands and buried the wood in it, leaving only a third exposed. Then I piled the dry weeds Ye Wenwen had brought on top, and around it I built a semicircular wall with stones to serve as a windbreak. After making full preparations, I whittled one end of the drill stick into a cone shape so it would fit exactly into the fire pit on the dry wood. Then I began pulling the fire bow. The fire bow started smoothly. It was a bit rough at first, but as I pulled more times, the drill tip and fire pit became polished, and the motion and speed grew faster and faster. Soon, smoke began rising from the drill tip. At this moment, I couldn't afford a mistake, or else I'd have to start over. So I steadied the speed. Smoke meant the temperature had reached the ignition point. I just needed to keep generating heat through friction until the drill tip and fire pit carbonized. A few minutes later, bright red flames appeared. I quickly crouched down and blew gently on the embers, igniting the dry tinder weeds. The two women were overjoyed at the sight of fire and hurriedly helped add many small dry twigs. The semicircular stone wall I'd built earlier now served well as a windbreak. I selected some larger logs and stood them up to form a conical campfire. This type of fire was very particular because we needed it to burn all night, and I couldn't keep starting fires by friction every time. Preserving the embers was essential. Inside the conical fire were small dry twigs, and outside were tightly packed large logs, like a wooden cone-shaped tent. This way, only a limited amount of air could enter, and the flames would be well controlled, not flaring up all at once, nor burning through all the wood. Otherwise, we'd have to search for dry wood all night to keep the fire alive. Just one conical fire wasn't enough, because it was mainly for warmth and not very good for cooking. So I had to build another fire nearby in a log cabin style. This way, we could both keep warm and cook food. When not in use, we could bury the log cabin fire with sand, and then the ground would stay warm all night. Lying on top of it to rest would also be a good option. After all, the bamboo bed shelter I'd made wasn't big enough for 3 people, and the lifeboat couldn't be slept in anymore. I've already let the air out to prevent punctures, so this will be my bed for the night. After finishing the fire, the two women, imitating scenes from TV, skewered the fish fillets on branches and grilled them over the charcoal fire. We were all exhausted tonight. Otherwise, I could have treated them to a wilderness feast. Now I need to hurry and finish their shelter, so everyone can rest and recover their strength. We have to get up early tomorrow. There's a ton of things to do, and I've had a suspicion in my mind all along, one that frightens me. I must climb to the top of the island first thing tomorrow to confirm it. I laid the split bamboo on the flat sandy ground, forming a bamboo bed. At the same time, I tied the remaining bamboo into a raft-like shape, using the rocks as walls, and leaned the bamboo wall at an angle to form a triangle. People can rest inside the triangular space. The broken edges of the bamboo wall face outward to prevent anyone inside from being accidentally cut by the sharp bamboo, and it also provides good rain protection. Rainwater will flow down the bamboo grooves to the ground. I just need to dig a drainage channel on the ground to keep the interior dry. Of course, these bamboo pieces alone can't make it completely waterproof. We still need to find some ferns, wild taro leaves, or banana leaves. We don't need to tonight because it won't rain tonight, but tomorrow and the day after are hard to predict. We can't find a new shelter for now. We'll definitely be staying here for quite a few days. It's very necessary to prepare for a rainy day. There's still some bamboo left. So I made another bamboo wall to cover the triangular entrance of the shelter, leaving only one opening. This way, we can avoid losing body heat to the sea breeze while sleeping at night. After setting up these 3 bamboo walls, I secured them with hemp rope to prevent them from falling over at a touch. If they're not sturdy and the wind knocks them down, they could easily injure someone. Getting injured in the wild is no small matter. So I must consider every detail that could pose a safety risk. By the time the shelter was ready, it was completely dark. The firelight by the sea was like a candle flickering in the wind, yet burning with vigorous vitality. Ye Wenwen held 2 skewers of grilled fish in her hands. Seeing that I had finished working, she immediately walked over with a smile and handed me a large skewer of fish. "Uncle, this is for you. I didn't grill it well. Please don't mind." I looked at the girl's beautiful and adorable smiling face, smiled, and then glanced at the fish fillet she grilled. This fish already had a lot of fat. The grilled fish pieces were a bit black and charred on the outside, but the aroma of the oil on them was enough to make my mouth water, as a man with a rumbling stomach. Not bad at all. I took a big bite as soon as it reached my mouth. The meaty fragrance of the tuna spread in my mouth, and every chew had a crispy texture. Soon, the whole large skewer of fish was finished. Deep-sea fish have an advantage over freshwater fish. They have very few bones, so you don't have to worry about getting pricked. When Susan saw that I had finished eating, she also came over and shyly handed me a skewer. "Mr. Pan, please try my cooking too. Don't laugh at me." I smiled, took it, and started eating big mouthfuls. Both women's cooking was good, but it lacked a bit of flavor without salt. However, for a starving person, this really didn't matter. Besides, it was grilled by two beauties, which made it taste especially delicious. It's good to be alive. I can hardly imagine that just earlier we were narrowly escaping death at sea. A heavy rain gave us hope for survival. Perhaps because this hope was so hard-won, the three of us felt especially happy, with smiles constantly on our faces. After eating their fill, the two women were about to head to the shelter when I called out to them. "You're not wearing shoes. Be careful of the bamboo ends on the ground. I haven't had time to bury them yet." I reminded them. The two women responded and happily walked into the shelter. After lying inside for a while, they came out again to collect the clothes drying on the rocks and spread them on the bamboo bed. I was also busy burying the bamboo and sticking out from the bed and piling stones on both sides, so they wouldn't stub their bare toes. If they did, they wouldn't be able to walk for a week. That would be a big problem, and if they got tetanus, it would be game over. I was now thinking that I should weave a pair of straw sandals for them. I really regretted not being more thoughtful at the time. If I had taken 2 pairs of shoes from those floating corpses for them, it wouldn't be so difficult now. Without shoes, it's absolutely impossible to enter the mountains, and it's also easy to get pierced by debris. So weaving 2 pairs of shoes is the top priority right now. But the materials needed for weaving straw sandals aren't so easy to come by, because they require rice straw, corn stalks, or sedge grass, and these things are simply nowhere to be found on the island. I set my sights on the hemp rope. If unraveled, it might be possible to weave 2 pairs of shoes. The net bag previously used to cover the cans would come in handy now. The two women gathered around me, helping to unravel the hemp rope net bag. Susan squatted in front of me. Because she was wearing a white spaghetti strap dress, she looked like a girl on a seaside outing. She was beautiful, and even squatting was graceful and elegant. Since the dress was a bit low-cut, squatting like that, I could easily see her snow-white, soft curves. I felt a slight impulse in my heart. On this deserted island, perhaps the two women are my only emotional comfort. During my last mission, I was tormented to death by loneliness. If I were alone again this time, I don't know if I could hold on. While weaving the straw sandals, I thought of my wife. She is the daughter of a fisherman. She is kind and beautiful. When I woke up in the arms of a demon, it was her I saw. She called to me like an angel, and at that time I thought I had died. Until she rescued me, ending my 133-day drifting ordeal. You have to know, during those 133 days, I never touched an island, drifting at sea the entire time. I had even forgotten what land was like. So much so that after lying in the hospital for a week, I still couldn't believe I was back on land. With my feet on the ground, I still felt like I was drifting at sea, and the sky above my head was spinning. When she came to see me again, I said I wanted to marry her. I know I was a bit hasty, but I really didn't want to miss such an angel. However, she unfortunately fell seriously ill. I borrowed a lot of money to cure her illness, but her legs became unable to walk. I knew I had to earn enough money to support her for a lifetime, so I went out to sea. Yet, at this moment, I truly miss her, my wife. Are you well in the distance? I am still alive. Wait for me. I will definitely come back, and I will surely fulfill my promise to protect you for a lifetime. Thinking of this, I held back my tears, not letting them fall and ruin my image as a tough, iron-willed man. Weaving straw sandals was also taught to me by my clever and deft wife. With every weaving motion, I would recall one of her smiles, as if the scene were just yesterday. By a little past 9 in the evening, 2 pairs of rope sandals were finished. When the two women put them on, they even looked somewhat fashionable, perhaps because their feet were simply too beautiful. They walked a few rounds on the beach in the shoes and came back very happily. "Thank you, Mr. Pan. I don't know what I would have done without shoes," Susan said gratefully. Ye Wenwen danced gracefully in front of me. A happy young girl loves to dance. She had a slender figure, and her dancing was truly beautiful, like a fairy fallen to the mortal world. "Rest early. There's still a lot to do tomorrow," I said to the two women. They were also tired, responded, and walked into the shelter. There was still a little space inside for me to lie down, but I didn't go in. I filled the fire pit with sand and stones, then laid 6 split bamboo pieces flat over it. Then I lay down on top, feeling very warm. "Mr. Pan, aren't you coming in to sleep?" Susan asked curiously when she saw I wasn't going in. Ye Wenwen also looked over. I need to watch the fire. You go to sleep first. I declined. The two women looked at each other and finally agreed, lying down to sleep first. I don't know what they were thinking. Perhaps they felt a bit embarrassed that I had worked hard to build the shelter but wasn't using it myself. Now it's not like when we were at sea, where there was no place to sleep, so naturally it wasn't appropriate to sleep together anymore. At sea we were hungry and thirsty, with no other thoughts at all, but now we can eat our fill. And there's a warm little nest. Sleeping between two women, it's naturally impossible for things to be too peaceful. They probably thought of this too. So neither of them brought it up again, but they felt a little guilty. After all, I used my labor to give them a dry and warm environment, while I lay outside enduring the cold wind. Of course, I didn't mind sleeping there. After regaining my strength, my body was rapidly absorbing nutrients, and in a few days I would be as strong as before. Then the chances of leading everyone to survive would be even greater. Thinking about it, I gradually fell asleep. When I woke up, I felt someone lying in my arms. I thought it was Susan, but unexpectedly, it was that girl Ye Wenwen. She was sleeping like a baby, looking so peaceful by the warm firelight. Her hands were clasped in front of her chest, her body curled up. That sleeping posture was a bit like a nestling in a bird's nest, evoking tenderness and a strong protective instinct. Ye Wenwen's appearance leans toward the lowly type. Although she just turned 18, her pretty face is still a bit chubby, with a touch of cute baby fat. During these days adrift at sea, her skin is no longer as milky white as before, but it still retains the beauty of a young girl, with two well-shaped full lips. Now no longer chapped, looking soft. I wondered, how did she end up lying in my arms? Did she wake up from a nightmare? I saw tear stains at the corners of her eyes. Was she missing her deceased uncle, or feeling homesick? Before, drifting at sea, life and death were unknown, and the will to survive outweighed everything. So there was no extra emotion for longing or crying. But now that we're on solid ground, her emotions are slowly welling up. She was resting her head on a thick piece of clothing. I slowly got up, only to find that my hands were wrapped with quite a bit of adhesive tape. Because using a small knife to cut bamboo and the earlier rowing had caused my palms and fingertips to be covered in blood blisters. And I hadn't treated them all this time. I never expected this girl to be so attentive, even taking care of these wounds for me. The snakebite wound on her own body must still be hurting, right? Yet she still took the time to care about me. My heart couldn't help but feel warm. Having a daughter like this would surely be very blissful, wouldn't it?